Hi guys, and welcome back to another podcast in cars. For me, it feels like this has been a while. I think because last week I recorded like super early in the week and stuff, but yeah. Anyway, moving on. Today's topic is gonna be cold air intakes and why they might not be doing what you think they might not actually be helping. They might not actually be adding any performance whatsoever. As well as some other basic nice loud car driving past, as well as some other like basic mods, like having a decat and so on and so forth. Um, Basically, we're going to be talking about some of the more simple mods that happen in the community. So let's start off with the intake, since that's the one that I started this description with. So I used to have that intake pipe with the filter. I'm sure a couple of you remember, of which, by the way, I'm heavily considering doing a giveaway for, simply because nobody wants to buy it and I can't earn any money, so I'm going to wiggle worm it there. Anyway, moving on. I know I'm busy making a video talking about how they're pointless, but now I'm going to be like doing a giveaway for it. But yes, anyway. So what a lot of people make the mistake of is they'll go have their stock intake piping and so on and so forth. Then they'll just plonk their filter, especially in the regards to Miatas, it's like right next to the headers. So you can imagine that filter's just breathing in all of the warm air and like it's doing absolutely nothing. It's not helping whatsoever. And to the point that even though you've got a better breathing filter now, it might actually have less horsepower because it's breathing in warmer air. So in defense of Miatas, they're very weird with their intake setup. Your best intake positioning is actually right up here, or here also, basically by the windscreen, because there's like a weird pressure system kind of thing, and basically the intake gets the best kind of airflow there. Somebody with way more knowledge can explain it down in the comments. I don't really fully understand it or comprehend it. I know that that's kind of how it works. Now I'm sure a lot of you have seen where the guys take out the indicators and they put like their filter kind of underneath the headlight, and then that's supposed to do that. That actually has a negative airflow, so air actually comes out from those vents. I think you can wiggle worm it, like if you had piping and like had actually blocked off your intake there, so like it's squared off away from the rest of the engine bay, and then you've got that little strip there so that it's got like an intake, then it might actually work, and probably actually quite well. But just having your filter kind of stuck behind your headlights and then that thing there, you're actually probably doing worse off than what I was with my filter, not even heat shielded or anything. To be fair, my manifold had a heat shield, but still, I wouldn't really count it. It's not great. I'm going to be honest with you. With my intake, I personally felt that I did get a gain in horsepower, and at very least in throttle response. If that ultimately was actually true is a completely different story. It's just how I personally felt. And you know, to be 100% honest, the turbo kit was always like in the cards for this car anyway, so having just the intake was more of just a gimmick to have fun with like induction noises rather than any performance. When you got a stock Miata, okay, performance means very little to you. A naturally aspirated Miata, I should say, unless you got like ITVs and like high compression pistons and so on and so forth. Like, I mean, horsepower means very little, so if you lose like 5 horsepower, it means very, very little. So yeah. But that is something that a lot of people do have the mistake of doing. For the guys like the Suzuki Swift Sports, I've seen it. The NPSs, I've seen it. I'm going to take off my hoodie because I'm really warm. Please forgive me. Let me try not show my nipples on YouTube, because it's not going to like that. The algorithm's going to hate me. So yeah, just it's something that a lot of people tend to not think about. They think about the fact that, oh yes, I have an intake system now, my car's going to go up in like 5 horsepower. not necessarily. It depends on the kind of air that it's breathing. Hence why it's called a cold air intake, because if it's breathing in cold air, then you'll get a gain. If it's not, then no. Now, I've had a lot of people, so this is just intake positioning altogether. Obviously, this also counts for turbocharged cars or modified turbocharged cars like my own. So as a matter of interest, where my intake is situated, which is right in front of the turbo, like I've got this much space between the turbo and then the intake. A lot of people said to me when I was building my car, that's going to be terrible for heat soak, you're just going to breathe in hot air and so on and so forth. And I was discussing with Callum to do the same situation as his. So what he's done for his is he's got an intake pipe that comes from the turbo, goes down underneath the headlight into his fender well, actually, and it breathes air there. Now, he said to me, his car can do that because he's got fender liners still, so or wheel well liners, whatever you want to call it. So his won't really get wet. It still breathes quite well down there, and so on and so forth. Whilst my car hasn't got those, so like if I was driving through rain, I'd fuck up my filter. RIP car, basically. So I couldn't put my filter there. However, when Callum and I were actually, well, not really me, when Callum and Dan were actually tuning my car, obviously they've got a sensor to read intake temperatures before and after the intercooler. My intake temperatures were the exact same as his, as long as my lights were up. Because obviously my lights are a lower profile, but they've got that small space between essentially the plate and the actual light. It kind of sits like that, if that makes sense. So this space here, there's enough gap to actually have as like an intake. And also on top of the light, if we remove the little shielding, that also acts as like an intake then from above the light, on just how aerodynamics works. Again, somebody with far more knowledge than me can explain that, but anyway, it basically acts like a hood scoop, and that is directly in front of / slightly to the side of my filter. So I was getting the same intake temperatures as he was. My point being, I don't have to worry about my intake temperatures. On the highway, when my lights are down and stuff, yeah, but my car's not built to be a highway car where it's doing pulls on the highway and stuff. So I have less to worry. And to be 100% honest, I've actually thought about removing one of my bright lights, so the inside lights, and like having an induction pipe that feeds straight to my filter as well. But it's kind of not my style. Anyway, my point being. So that's where a lot of people tend to make mistakes for their intakes. They keep in mind the fact that it's a cone filter now, so it's going to breathe better. They forget about the heat aspect and the heat soak aspect. I was kind of forced into a corner and got lucky at the fact that my intake could breathe where it was, so that's cool bananas. But not everyone becomes that lucky. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to say in regards to the filters. Obviously, also don't get like a cheapo cone filter. Those tend to actually not breathe that well either. So, yeah. Obviously, the ideal situation for your filters to like completely box it off near an intake of some form, so that it can, it just gets the cold air from that intake and like nothing else, essentially. Obviously, there's still heat soak in terms of like the heat from the engine bay will hit the wall that you've now created around your filter, of which will then heat soak into your filter. But obviously you've got like another barrier now. It's not just heat from the engine to the filter. I know Callum's got like a shield that actually sits around his turbo on the hot side. It like covers the hot side so that the cold side and his filter will stay cold. Well, obviously his filter's away, but if I use it on my kind of setup, I don't know, it's really interesting situations and dynamics actually that play into the whole situation of trying to keep your intake temperatures down so you can actually get a gain in horsepower. My point being, just be wary of cold air intakes. They don't necessarily add horsepower. Again, I personally felt with my one, I think that's because the diameter of the piping was larger. So although the temperatures might have been slightly higher, the physical intake was essentially larger, so there was, although the throttle body limits it, there was just more of a gasp of air, though, if that makes sense. Again, at very least, the most that I felt for mine is like throttle response was definitely increased. But yeah, on to the next point. Of like decatting your car. Decatting your car sometimes doesn't actually help, because for example on my dad's V6 Hilux, they're pretty much straight through cats. Like, they don't actually like restrict airflow that much. Obviously they play a small role in it, but not as much a role as like people actually want to think that they do. So decatting them, it helps with a little bit of like fuel consumption, a little bit of throttle response, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but nowhere near as much as what you'd expect from like decatting your car, you know. Also, a lot of the times decatting your car just makes your car sound terrible in the first place. Obviously the cats are there for a reason. It's releasing exceptionally bad fumes into the environment and so on and so forth. Not that a lot of us are concerned with that. I would like to just point out for a moment, I am concerned about the environment. I am an environmentalist in terms of that. I love nature and animals and so on and so forth. I can still enjoy sports cars and stuff. Keeping in mind, we are a minority here, so, you know, having fucking 1 out of 100, I'd actually like to point out there's probably about 200 cars in this little business complex. 2 of them may not have like cats. They may have aggressive exhaust systems, whatever you want to call it, or I should say polluting exhaust systems. 1 of them I can confirm, and that's because it's my car. The other car that's down there I don't actually know, so I can't confirm it. But so 2 out of 200, that's 1 in 100 has an exhaust system. That's talking of a business complex where there's very much like car people. If we had to go look at like general, like if I had to go to a shopping center, anyway, this is a completely different side topic, I'm sorry. My point is, decatting your car might not actually, it probably will give you a little bit extra performance, but nowhere near as much as you expect. And then in terms of things like my dad's car, where it's got like a straight through cat, you might not actually get a horsepower increase whatsoever. You might just get like a different sound. And that's what confuses me. Like when the guys were modifying the 400Zs and the Toyota Supra, the new Mark V Supras and stuff, their cats seem to be very similar to that situation. It seemed to be like a straight through cat. I can't confirm that because I've never actually looked at one, but from what I could see, those cats looked tiny and they looked pretty straight through, so I can't really comment. But anyway, and that's like, you know, it doesn't, in those kind of situations, decatting your car doesn't really help as much as people think. I know I've got a friend with a Honda Civic Type R. You'll actually see his Type R in Friday's video, but yeah. He said to me that he did like a downpipe, so I'm assuming a decat, but yeah. And he said he's definitely gotten a horsepower increase from that, and better throttle response, better turbo response, so on and so forth. Sorry, I've got burps for no apparent reason whatsoever. And he was basically stating this to me, of which on his car I can believe, because on those Civics, I believe that, again, being a very modern car and then being in the class that it is, so a hatchback, they get like very strict emission standards, so those cars tend to have larger cats and stuff. With that being said, your Vauxhall Corsa probably won't. Well, I don't know, I suppose it is a European car and they're very strict on emissions as well, but you know, your naturally aspirated Vauxhall Corsa, no, I don't think so. If it's a turbo Corsa, what's it, Corsa Sport, whatever, yeah, maybe, but yeah. Not to bully the Corsa people, sorry. It's all in jest, I promise. I'm sorry. Again, I'm bullying Miata people in the previous segment, so yeah. So yeah, decatting your car might not actually do as much as you'd think as well. In terms of the rest of the exhaust system, like removing silencers and mufflers and so on and so forth, they all play a role. But again, I think like people are like, oh yeah, you remove a muffler and it adds like 50 horsepower. It really doesn't. You maybe get like 2 horsepower, 2 extra horsepowers, my dude. And the biggest thing in this entire argument is it's all fine and well. Okay, you have your cold air intake, and you've actually like boxed it off and everything as well. You've decatted your car, and your car happens to be one of the ones that would actually get a good performance increase out of it. Maybe you've gone for a full straight pipe, so you've removed all of the restrictions in your exhaust and stuff. It's still ultimately only going to add like 10 horsepower, unless you get it tuned. And that is where a lot of people make very big mistakes. They do the mods but don't actually tune the car now that the car has the availability for that. I pulled a whole bunch of hair off my hoodie and now I had nowhere to put it. But yeah, that is where a lot of people have their biggest mistake. They put a filter, they put a good exhaust system, they put even suspension and stuff, aftermarket suspension, but they don't tune it fine out for what they need to do. And then your car rides hard and difficult because the suspension's preset, if you will, is for like track use. So you're in an uncomfortable ride on the road and you're just like, oh, well, that's coilover life, static life, No, you can have a very comfortable ride still. It's just you've not set up your car. Same positioning again, obviously, for the tune. A lot of guys do all these mods and stuff, but then don't actually go through all the effort of like getting the car like tuned up so that it will actually have a difference in terms of horsepower and stuff. That is my argument. A lot of people basically forget to do the tuning part. It's all fine and well for me to add a turbocharger, but if I drive around on a base tune and not on what it's basic, if I tune it up to like 0.0 or 0.2, there we go, bar, it's gonna make a little bit of extra horsepower, but that's like a baseline tune. That's what it's supposed to be doing at like just casual driving, not mash throttle and stuff. So now if I'm driving mash throttle and it's only making that, I'm not going to make much horsepower now, am I? You have to get it tuned and like tune it into the boost and so on and so forth. I'm going to be honest with you, stock everything, stock intake, stock exhaust system, blah, blah, blah. A lot of cars, if you take them to a dyno and you go get them tuned, they'll make at least an extra 50 horsepower. Just out of the factory, if not more. I know with the Mark V Supra, a lot of guys were getting like an additional 150 horsepower out of the stock car. I was seeing a video yesterday actually speaking about the Mark V Supra, where it was on the stock turbo. It just had a different intake manifold. It did have an aftermarket intake manifold, so a larger throttle body as well. Different fuel system. It was basically, it beat the world record for the most horsepower made on a stock turbo, and it was like, I think it was like a 700 horsepower car or something on stock turbo. It's pretty impressive, to be 100% honest. So yeah, I don't know, people need to keep that in mind. Sorry, I'm trying to sit out of the sun. I'm being burnt over here. People need to keep that kind of stuff in mind as well. It's all fine and well, even if you go through all the correct steps to do the suspension, exhaust, intake, turbo, other modifications. It's all fine and well, but if your car's not tuned or like set up correctly, you haven't done the fine out stuff, it means very little. So yeah, I don't know if anybody in the comments down below has anything to add to what I'm saying here. or even argue. If you've got an argument, please do put it in the comments. I'm more than happy to discuss it and see where I'm wrong, if I am. I do want to just say for a moment here, for people that have gotten this far in the video, yeah, fuck it, I should put a disclaimer at the beginning of the video, but anyway, I know a little bit about cars. I understand from an outside perspective, it may seem like I know a lot about cars and stuff. I know very little, to be 100% honest. Compared to the amount of knowledge that there is out there in the world, I know very, very little on, like, exactly, the finite tunings and so on and so forth of the cars and so on and so forth. I'm kind of, where these podcasts and cars come from is I'll see a TikTok and it's like, oh yes, that would actually make a very good discussion to have on one of these videos. So I kind of bring up my knowledge on the situation, which may not even be correct. So also take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. I'm also more than happy for people to come into the comments and add their knowledge, as well as correct me if I'm wrong in a situation. That is 100% fine. I'm cool for it. Because I'm also here to learn. I'm not here I'm here to try teach what I am aware of and what I know, but I'm also here to learn. I'm on this platform to learn, so yeah. Oh yeah, something that I was going to bring up when I was talking about the Supra is I know that modern cars also come with locked ECUs. Now, I don't want to go too much into this, or maybe I should. Okay, I'm going to go into this. I was actually going to save this for an entirely different video, but I mean, it's only been 20 minutes and these are supposed to be an hour and something, so I'll go into this. So modern cars come with like locked ECUs and stuff, which means basically you can't tune the car. Now, I understand why car manufacturers do this, because they're forced into a corner by essentially Greenpeace, that, people aren't allowed. Well, how do I explain myself properly? Obviously, for example, the Mark V Supra that came out, that is going to be like, before that even came out, all car enthusiasts were looking at that and being like, yes, that's a new tuner car that everyone's going to want to get their hands on and modify, do wide-body kits, do turbocharger kits, do fuel systems, do all these fancy, amazing things to said car. Now, with that being said, Toyota is aware of this, and they're kind of forced legally to have to make the ECU very difficult to break into, essentially, and be able to modify the car. Because otherwise, again, they've set the car's ECU so that the car from factory produces a set amount of emissions. They could get a very bad rap if you basically just have to press a button and now it produces so much more emissions and stuff, and then Toyota could end up getting into very big problems, essentially. So the locked ECU thing, I do understand from a manufacturer point. They kind of have to do it because if they don't, they'll get into very big legal dramas and so on and so forth with, their car was said to only produce this amount of emissions, now you're not, so emission regulations, the government's going to be like, naughty Toyota or whoever. So, but from a tuner perspective, from a car guy's perspective, essentially, it ends up just being exceptionally irritating because it's like, we're going to do it anyway. All you're doing is just making it slightly more difficult for us. And again, what I was saying earlier in my video is just like, if I had to go to a parking lot, a shopping center, and I had to go walk through the shopping center, yes, there may be some sportsy BMWs and so on and so forth. The amount of modified cars out of I'm trying to think, like, the shopping center that's down the road from my house, there's probably over like a couple thousand parking spaces, of which, like on the weekends and stuff, 99% of them are full. So we're talking about probably about like, I don't even know how many parking spots there would be, but there's like a couple thousand cars, okay, we're talking probably close to like 5,000, if not more, maybe a little bit less, I don't know. But there's like a lot of cars. If I had to go walk through that shopping center, out of all of the cars there might be, I want to say three cars out of the couple thousand that would be at the shopping center. Three would be modified and have an exhaust system that adds extra emissions, if you will. So my point is, if you had to look at it on like a global scale or country scale even, where the amount of modified cars that are actually producing extra emissions versus the amount of electric cars and just normal petrol cars and so on and so forth that still have their things and blah blah blah, so that they're not creating emissions, we are a very minuscule amount. And that's where my argument comes in. It's like the amount of, like, majority of the people who are going to buy a Mark V Supra or 400Z are not going to touch it. They're going to drive their car stock standard pretty much, until their car's about 15 years old. Then they might flog it. And yeah, maybe the second-hand owner like tunes it and stuff and modifies it. But my point is, like, those cars are already so rare as it is. The second-hand market, it's going to shrink because some people are going to keep it stock for the rest of their lives. Some people are going to crash theirs and they're going to be written off and just taken off the market. My point is, the amounts of car guys and guys that are damaging towards the environment and stuff, very small. So, and then again, with the electric car movement that is coming and taking over, of which I want to just point out very briefly that electric cars do, you know what word I'm attempting to use there with a very large F. They don't do like anything for the environment, because at the end of the day, the coal trucks, or not the coal trucks, sorry, the mining trucks that are still taking all the lithium and so on and so forth for the, is it lithium? I think it is lithium, but also other materials from the mining, from the mine to the wherever, so it can go get refined. The refineries are running also like coal and so on and so forth to refine the material. Then that gets transported by gas trucks. Gas. It's a liquid. Why do Americans call it gas? By petrol or diesel powered trucks to the Tesla manufacturer or Rimac or whoever it is, an electric car manufacturer. What's the new one? Lucid. Lucid is the guy that used to work for Tesla and then he got annoyed and left or something like that. Anyway, my point being, it will go to one of the electric car manufacturers and then it becomes an electric car off an electric grid that's not necessarily eco-friendly. So all of that uneco-friendliness. Now, obviously, the ultimate goal is to get all of that to be eco-friendly, and you have to kind of start somewhere. And I suppose starting at the end scale and kind of moving up along the board might be the way that they're going. I'm just stating that I think it's a bit silly, because I think you should start from the top point so that, yes, you've got electric cars, but, the entire process to get all the electric pieces from it, it had no emissions, or at least it was a neutral positioning. I don't know. I find it super weird. But my point is, the locked ECU arguments, I understand why manufacturers have to do it. Again, they're kind of positioned into doing it via emissions regulations that they have to follow and so on and so forth. I just find it a bit silly and a bit stupid, because it's like, just, these cars are so rare and stuff, and the chances of them being modified in the first place are not even like that great, because again, majority of the people who are going to buy them aren't going to modify them. So it's like, who cares? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm too uneducated in the situation. Maybe I need to go speak to the the heads of like Toyota, the heads of Nissan, the heads of Porsche even and stuff, and see what they have to say in regards to the the situation. But that's kind of where I stand, and I'm like, come on. I don't know. I think this is why a lot of us really like our old school JDM shitboxes, because like the ECUs were so simple that you couldn't even use the ECU. That is the ultimate locked ECU. It was so simple you couldn't even modify it. Like these new ECUs, it's kind of just like, oh, okay, you know, hack the programming or whatever you want to call it, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I can modify it and tell it to do this, tell it to add more fuel, tell it to add more boost or whatever. Whilst, you know, back in the day, like my ECU, the stock ECU for Miata, it's literally almost an on-off switch. That's all it is. Like you can't, it's got like the most basic shit on it. It's the most useless ECU you've ever seen in your life. To the point that that's why a lot of the older JDM cars, you have to change for like an aftermarket ECU to run the system. Otherwise it just can't. So yeah. Conclusion for today's video: be careful when you modify your car, because it might not actually be adding any performance whatsoever. It might actually be damaging your car's performance. And then on top of that, if you are modifying your car and modifying it correctly, keeping in mind that you also have to then tune it, otherwise you're not going to get any of the benefits from it in the first place. And locked ECUs are kind of dumb. Is there anything else that I want to add? I don't think so. So yeah, until next time guys, I hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry if this video seemed a little bit awkward. I didn't really know what to talk about because it's kind of like just a very short little topic, to be honest. But yeah, I made it last for half an hour. I think I'm good. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then guys, cheers.